So it's been a year since I made this video on the really poor relationship between Valencia supporters and the club, thanks to their owner Peter Lim, the former president Anil Murthy, the club's ties with Jorge Mendes as the point of contention, etc, etc, etc. And 1 year on, and things haven't really improved for Valencia. In fact, they got worse in a lot of ways over the past season. Hello there, welcome to Rabona TV. I'm Adrian, the guy who does the content. I am a content doer. That's my official title, as well as Rabona TV Overlord. Thanks for coming through, guys. And if you are new around here and you find yourself enjoying this video, then be sure to subscribe for more videos on all things football. 90% of my coverage is in Europe, but we throw in some other regions as well once in a while. Now, for this video, I will be joined by football journalist and La Liga expert Jonas Jever, who has offered his expertise to the likes of The Guardian, 442, TV2, and of course is a part of La Liga Loca podcast. And in speaking to him prior to our conversation about Valencia, he made mention of his latest endeavor, FC Quiz, and as a lover of quiz or trivia nights, I had to check it out after our interview. This is not an ad, guys, but I know I'm going to be hooked. They have daily and weekly quizzes, permanent ones, quiz leaderboards, and it's not only fun, but improves your knowledge. Again, this is not an ad, but I really like what Jonas and the guys from FC Quiz are doing. So I've linked to it below. If you are like me, you enjoy quizzes, then go ahead and check it out. All right, let's set the stage and then we'll bring in Jonas. So as I mentioned in the intro, I did a video on this topic 1 year ago, which illustrated all of the grievances that Valencia supporters had with Peter Lim, had and still do have. How close he is to Jorge Mendes, how the Lim family have stoked the fire with some of their comments on social media, and how club president Anil Murthy, well, former club president now, hasn't done much to endear himself to the Valencia faithful. In fact, that's a great place to start as far as updates to the situation, because Murthy had some audio leaks released to the public in which he allegedly said, we say allegedly as we are dealing with leaks here, in which he allegedly said all sorts of things about players that must be sold, big players, the most valuable assets, in fact, such as Soler, Gaia, perhaps Gedge. At the same time, Murthy allegedly was saying how he would kill players like Carlos Soler in the media if they were to leave Valencia for free next year. How he had misled local Valencia government officials about the new misterE plans, all sorts of crap that you don't want to hear from a president. Well, to be honest, he's a figure that Valencia supporters don't want to hear from, period. And they don't have to anymore. But Murthy isn't the only one who has been sacked, as Bordalas was sacked as well after just 1 season in charge of the club. So given the divide between the supporters and the ownership and administration of the club, how did the supporters feel about the sacking of Bordalas? Was it met with relief or yet another cause for discontent when it comes to the running of the club? Because they did finish mid-table again.
It's a little bit two-sided because Bordalas was obviously not a manager who played the type of football that Valencia fans associate with their side. Obviously, Valencia are known as a free-flowing attacking team, which, if we're going way back to the Kempes days, obviously they were free-flowing and fun and exuberating, even though they were still a chaotic club, which they still are. In the early 2000s, obviously they played Champions League finals with Héctor Cooper as the manager, and obviously they had Mendieta, Kili Gonzalez, Vicente Alvelda, Baraja, all these players. John Carew, who was my hero, who was the reason why I became so enthused with the Valencia, was in that side, who lost obviously on the penalty shootout to Bayern Munich in the Champions League final in 2001. And that is Valencia for a lot of supporters, and that is sort of what the granddads have told their grandkids, and what the grandkids who have now grown have learned to expect. Bordalas was quite the opposite. He was a manager, or is a manager, who himself professes to be very inspired by Johan Cruyff and the way he plays football, but at the same time his style is rather the opposite. It's kicking, it's screaming, it's set pieces, it's breaking up momentum, it's yellow cards, it's rash tackles, it's everything that you don't expect for a Johan Cruyff side to be playing. A lot of Valencia fans did not like him for that aspect, but he took them to the cup final. So it's the thing about, well, is it a necessary evil in a way? And Bordalas proved to be a necessary evil because in some aspects he reminded people as well also of Marcelino, who was a manager who obviously won the cup in 2019, took them into the Champions League, who was sacked by Anil Murthy and by the Valencia board on pretty unreasonable grounds. He had some of that aspect in him to create Valencia into that type of gritty but direct side. The only issue was that Valencia were gritty and direct. They just didn't score goals, and that is usually the point of the game, I suppose.
As I detailed at length in my video about Valencia before and in a video on Jorge Mendes, the Portuguese super agent's fingerprints are all over this club. And that has been a point of contention for supporters all along. It's a double-edged sword, right? Mendes uses Valencia almost like a port to dock his clients at, some of which have been good servants for the club, such as a Gonçalo Guedes, others not so much. And the financial side of these deals are worrying, or at the very least, very puzzling. And so Gattuso arrives at Valencia after doing some pretty decent work at both Milan and Napoli in the past, but having missed out on Fiorentina and Spurs jobs in the past as well. And he immediately has to defend himself for comments he has made in the past that were homophobic and sexist. But he also had to defend himself because he is a Jorge Mendes client, a guy who some Valencia supporters are sick of hearing about at their club. How did Gattuso's arrival go down with the supporters with that in mind?
First and foremost, the reportings of it and sort of the first news stories about Gattuso taking over came as a surprise to everyone, because Bordalas was still, it was said that he was still thinking about whether or not he wanted to continue on or whether he was going to ask for his resignation. The thing was that all of a sudden there was news reports that Gattuso had been and visited Lim in Singapore alongside Jorge Mendes, and that he was groomed to become the new manager. And instantly Valencia fans started thinking, well, hey, isn't this what happened with Marcelino and Albert Salades a couple of years ago? It's the same sort of thing. They're doing the same thing again. They're bringing in a new manager behind the current manager's back, and they're hiring someone who's there to basically pick up the scraps from someone who has, in some aspects as well, overperformed. You have to say that for Bordalas, from his point, right? It hasn't looked good, but it has had some results. So initially, the thing was, oh, here we go again, another sacking that just isn't justified in a way. But once the dust settled, once people started looking at it, it was sort of also a get out of jail free card with Bordalas, because things hadn't looked too good with him. I mean, it just hadn't looked too good, and there were players that were seemingly pretty fed up with his style. People are kind of settling in what to think about it, but of course, Gennaro Gattuso is a huge name in football in general. He's a World Cup winner, obviously, as you pointed out yourself. I mean, he's done some good stuff with both Milan, with Napoli, and he's also a character. And that's something that I think that Valencia really, really want, because what you see a lot in La Liga is that a lot of the same managers pop up at different clubs. There's always the same manager. There's always been at 3, 4, or 5 different clubs. And Bordalas is one of those who's now been at Getafe and Valencia. He's probably going to pop up, are we going to say Mallorca, for example, during the season, for example. It's destined to happen. Whereas Gattuso is a new name. It's something fresh. And obviously, he goes to the right club, because he goes to a club that is sometimes maybe good,
sometimes maybe shit.
I know that there has been a lot of discomfort with how close Jorge Mendes is to Peter Lim and the club, and how a lot of his clients end up at the club. And in fact, that was apparently one of the reasons as to why Gattuso only lasted at Fiorentina for 23 days, because, Rocco Commisso was saying that he was trying to suggest a few too many Jorge Mendes clients to come over. Now, Gattuso has said that he has never signed a Jorge Mendes client. Does this just make the fans further frustrated that Mendes is still close to the club? This is just a guy that they cannot get rid of? Or do some of them see a benefit to some of the players that he can bring to the club?
I think some of them see the benefit of it, but at the same time, everyone knows that when a transfer happens, the money isn't going back to Valencia, at least not 100%. A lot of it is going to Jorge Mendes. But then again, Jorge Mendes can say, well, you were never able to sign this player hadn't it been for me. There is I suppose, a relationship of necessity here Jorge Mendes is able to, as you said, plant players at Valencia, and Valencia are able to get pretty good players of high quality that can shoot them into the Champions League, for example. I remember when Jorge Mendes popped up alongside Peter Lim, everyone was very happy, because Peter Lim had obviously come with all his promises, and that he was going to build out the new stadium, and that he was going to build a team that was going to challenge the likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid, that he was going to make, to quote someone else who probably is as popular as Peter Lim, he was going to make Valencia great again. So it was going to be fantastic for Valencia supporters. But then Jorge Mendes kind of popped into it all, and it was sort of, wait a minute, we know he's a huge agent, and we know that he's also going to be the agent of Nuno Espirito Santo, who obviously became the manager. And then you start seeing a lot of players pop up: Andre Gomez, Rodrigo Moreno. Now you have Gonçalo Guedes who's there. I believe Nicolas Otamendi might be a client of his as well. So there were so many that started popping up that people were wondering, where is all the money going once Valencia sell the players? And the players were also bought for extreme high amounts of money. I mean, Andre Gomes and Rodrigo Moreno were both bought for money that Valencia really didn't have, or at least it didn't seem like they had that money, but all of a sudden they did, because Peter Lim and Jorge Mendes were in bed. So I think Valencia supporters have grown accustomed to Mendes having a lot of control at the club. And I think that if this means that Valencia can play regularly in the Champions League or regularly in the Europa League, I think they've gotten to a stage now, as long as Peter Lim is there, I think Jorge Mendes in some aspects is viewed as the lesser of two evils.
In his unveiling, Gattuso said that if there are any losses, if the team is doing poorly, etc., that the supporters should not criticize Lim, but criticize him. Him being Gattuso, of course. In your opinion, is he risking being seen as a Peter Lim loyalist amongst the supporters with comments like that? Or is this something that they want to see, that this is a coach that is taking ownership?
I think it's rather obvious that he would never have gotten that job unless the relationship with Lim and well, I don't think he'd even consider that job hadn't the relationship between Lim and Mendes been as tight as it is. So I think that he's saying all the right things, both for himself. Obviously, when you're a manager, of course, the first thing you say, you protect the players and you protect the people that have hired you. That's just being a smart businessman, I suppose. And I also think that what Valencia fans are more so intrigued about is, would the hiring of Gattuso and the sacking of Bordalas and also the firing of Anil Murthy, does that mean that they're more likely to see a renewal of Carlos Soler's contract? Is it more possible that Gaya stays after this? What about Gonzalo Guedes? Obviously, he is a Mendes client as well, and now he's obviously being managed by a Mendes client as well. Does that mean that he's going to perhaps stay for another season? So there are all these sudden switches to a lot of the sagas that have happened at Valencia in terms of player personnel that might actually have a more positive outlook now that Gattuso is there.
As far as public enemies go amongst Valencia supporters, you have Peter Lim and his family is number one. Then Anil Murthy was seen as number two. Some lump Jorge Mendes in there as well as a contributor. But as Jonas said, he's seen as the lesser of two evils, three evils in this case. Anil Murthy was dismissed as his leaked audio was initially defended by the club, but later condemned. If not with words, then through their actions of sacking him. In steps Sean Bai as the acting president or director general, and plenty of words with the hopes of, appeasing supporters, these same supporters that they had previously tried to keep quiet by turning off replies to their social media channels. Bai had this to say, quote, "From Valencia Club de Football, we want to bring about a change of direction, be self-critical so that the fans can be proud of this club. We think it is time to be closer to the fans, so we've decided to reopen the social networks." Yes! Let us open up Twitter, guys. Bai also went on to say things like how they want to make a 180-degree change, turn a new page, and rebuild relationships with fans. But is this all too little too late? Is it at all possible for Lim and his team to reconcile with supporters? Or has the damage already been done?
Damage is done at this stage. It just is done. I mean, because there's been so many promises as well, and they've promised and they promised and they promised, and they said they were going to build a new stadium, which they have not done. They said they were going to compete for titles. I mean, they've said so many things that they're just not able to deliver on. And obviously, when the economy absolutely went downhill, they started writing out IOUs to players. They started selling off talents for nothing. I mean, Ferran Torres, the transfer to Man City, and now he's obviously at Barcelona, which disgusts every single Valencia fan. I mean, they've just malnourished that club for so long now that I don't think there's a way back. And I mean, you cannot go to a game. I was at a Valencia game at the tail end of last season, and the amount of these Lim go home signs that the fans have inside the stadiums and outside the stadiums, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. And you also saw for the last home game. I mean, it will become an iconic shot the day that Peter Lim leaves. When you see the drone, where you see the stadium where the team is playing, and there's no one in the stands. There's no one in the crowd. I mean, it looks like a preseason match. And then outside the stadium, in the gates and the streets around misterE, it's just packed with people. It's packed with people who refuse to go into the stands, refuse to pay their money to go in. And that to me, I I've seen that shot many a time, and every time I stop, I think, wow, that's powerful. That's so powerful. That's people power for you.
Murthy said important players must be sold. Gattuso said he wasn't informed that they would be forced to sell anybody. Where does the truth lie? Nobody really knows, but what's for certain is that nobody is at all comfortable with the situation.
Valencia fans are in a stage now when they're just looking at who is the next to leave this sinking ship. I mean, I think that is one thing that needs to be mentioned, because Gaia is such an important, integral part of the team. Carlos Soler is the prodigy of the club more so than anything. I mean, once Dani Parejo was sold, or it wasn't even sold, it was given away to Villarreal. He became sort of the new leader, the one that was going to usher in Valencia into a new era where young players were going to, like Jesus Vasquez and Mosquera and the likes, Guillamon in midfield, where a lot of these players were supposed to be bred in with Soler as the shining star. And if he leaves following, everything that he's gone through, and obviously the audio leaks and everything where Murthy said that he threatened Carlos Soler, if you leave for free, I mean, I will throw your name into the press and I will make everyone realize how bad of a person you are, and I'll kill you in the press and everything like that. So everyone is sitting kind of on bated breath to see if Valencia can actually get through a summer without losing integral pieces of their team and having to rebuild. And the thing is, once Valencia starts rebuilding and they try to rebuild, every player that comes into the door is usually a lesser version of what left. But that is Valencia in a nutshell. It's so typical of them to be able to do stuff like that. So the fans are on bated breath, both in the positive sense with Gattuso, but also in a negative sense with their ownership, and also important players potentially leaving this summer.
When I made that video on Valencia last summer, it was titled "How to Ruin a Historic Club." And based off of everything that I've read, watched, and heard from Jonas, it seems as though nothing has changed, and it could potentially get worse, which, I mean, you just hate to hear it, man. But hey, that's all for this video, guys. All the best to the Valencia supporters that we have in our audience. We're thinking of you, and hopefully, good times are on the way in the not-so-distant future. Guys, thanks for watching this video. Another thank you to Jonas Jever for not only offering his expertise for this video, but for introducing me to FC Quiz. I have a new way to waste time, baby. Thanks again, guys, and be well. Ciao.